The swordsmanship that felt somewhat unfamiliar today already shows the charm of a swordsman. The posture is precise, the movements are swift and decisive, there's a sense of agility. Sword Dao prodigy. At this moment, these 4 words were the only thing that surfaced in Xianxia's mind. You know, how many days has Bian Rushu been learning this set of swordsmanship? It would already be good if she could get a grasp of it in half a month. But now, she has already become proficient, and there's a rare spirituality in her moves, and that's the key. Although he scolded the young girl harshly yesterday, it was only because he saw the child's talent in Sword Dao and the hope that she could become a strong swordsman in the future, which made him strict and demanding. He didn't expect that Bian Rushu's performance today would far exceed his expectations. She's definitely a Sword Dao genius, a rare kind. Good, very good. Xianxia smiled, nodded repeatedly, and when Bian Rushu finished practicing, he asked, "Did you practice by yourself last night?" Instantly, Bian Rushu thought of Brother Hao's guidance, but then she remembered his stern advice and warnings. Hence, she gently nodded. Xianxia was not surprised. If she hadn't put in the effort last night, she wouldn't have been able to perform like this today. This swordsmanship is a bit too simple for you. Today I'll teach you a higher level swordsmanship, Xianxia said. The previous one was only a low-level swordsmanship. He had no right to enter the Li family's listening rain tower, and he wasn't qualified to teach the higher-level swordsmanship, let alone the supreme-level swordsmanship listed there, to the young girl before him. Unless it was by the instruction of Li Hao's parents, even the current Li Hao wasn't qualified. He was still too young to lead the family. Bian Rushu nodded. An adult and a child, they began practicing a new swordsmanship in the courtyard again. One teaching, the other learning. Li Hao looked on for a moment, feeling a bit bored, then continued to ponder his own chess strategy. With black and white pieces in his hands, he flipped them between his fingers, gently rubbing them, while his mind was occupied with thinking about the chess manuals. Time passed unnoticed in this courtyard. During the day, Li Hao stared blankly at the chessboard by himself. In the evenings, he occasionally offered guidance to Bian Rushu, correcting some of her minor mistakes. Bian Rushu's rapid progress in Sword Dao elated Xianxia. Months later, within Piaoxu courtyard, Li Hao stood silently in the crowd, watching an elderly man with an immortal demeanor take the 8-year-old Li Wushuang away for cultivation. Fifth Lady tearfully said her goodbyes, reminding Shuanger to eat well, behave well, and sleep well. Li Hao remembered. When he was still in swaddling clothes, this young girl clung to his mother's pants, sizing him up with her shining bright eyes. Fifth Lady had 3 children, 2 girls and 1 boy. This was her eldest daughter. At the age of 5, during the bone evaluation, she showed a 9th grade battle physique, and the Li family hailed another prodigy. Now, having exhibited extremely high talent in cultivation, she's been noticed by an expert who has taken her on as a disciple. This scenario, so familiar to Li Hao, he had witnessed it 2 years ago as well. That time, it was Liu Yuerong's child, led away by a bald monk reciting Buddhist scriptures. Clearly, that person was from Mount Wuliang. In the Li family, those with exceptional talent usually enter Daiyu's top forces for cultivation, which is also one way for top forces to extend their connections. As for those with lesser talent, like the second lady's second son, who only had a 7th grade battle physique, though he was also considered a genius, was clearly a cut below those prodigies and would study at Qingzhou City's Tan Palace Academy. Compared to Fifth Lady's maternal feelings, Li Wushuang's young face showed maturity, like a little adult, calmly nodding, reminding her mother to take care of her health, and her father as well. Subsequently, the young girl's gaze swept over the courtyard, looking at everyone in turn. As she passed Li Hao, she gave him a brief glance, already having little impression of him. Amongst the 3rd generation in the family, those whom her mother frequently mentioned to her were only a few with exceptional talent. For example, the second lady's child, Li Qianfeng, was the target she was chasing. The others, she barely took notice of. Immersed in the world of martial arts, the words of her mother, the martial instructors, and the servants had influenced her from a young age. Despite her youth, her mind had matured, and she had a sharpness in her eyes, with aspirations and goals to pursue the pinnacle of martial arts. Saying farewell to her parents, accompanied by the well wishes of the crowd, the young girl left with the Taoist. When they would meet again, It would probably be years later when she returned to the family with a famed reputation. Life settled back into calm. In these peaceful days, Li Hao slowly returned to playing chess by himself. But now, he wasn't playing for experience, but rather to purely contemplate each game. He was trying to overcome himself. When playing white, he would switch his thinking to white, and when playing black, he would switch to black. Although the process was a bit difficult, it felt like a challenge. Enjoyment was found in the struggle against oneself. In this world where entertainment was scarce, Li Hao gradually grew fond of this kind of focus on something, especially when it also offered the fun of a challenge. Therefore, the maids would occasionally be startled by the young master's sudden outburst. For example, while quietly eating, he would suddenly shout out, "Ah, that move should have been placed there," with a look of regret. Sometimes he would point to a flower bed and ask the maids beside him, "Do you see those flowers? Don't they resemble a chessboard?" The maids. They didn't understand. Not at all. But if the young master said so, then it must be so. After all, he was the young master of the house. So what else could they do but agree? By the time Li Hao was 6, Lin Haixia found him and said he wanted to teach him techniques. He moved a weapon rack over and let Li Hao choose and practice with each weapon, just like he had done for Bian Rusho before. However, considering that Li Hao's physique wasn't as top-notch as Bian Rusho's, he decided to delay it for a year to avoid practicing too early and negatively affecting bone development. Only then did Li Hao realize that this strong figure from the military was lingering in the mansion just to teach him techniques. I thought I couldn't cultivate? Li Hao dragged out of bed early in the morning. Yawning, just wanted to crawl back into bed. First, practice the techniques. What kind of response was that? Being idle is surely better than being overworked? But Lin Haixia had clearly made up his mind, and no matter how much Li Hao argued, it was futile. Finally, with a stern face, Lin Haixia took out a bamboo stick and threatened to hit him if he didn't obey. Li Hao wasn't afraid of pain, after all. Given his current physical strength, unless Lin Haixia really hit hard, it was nothing more than tickling. But seeing the other party taking it so seriously, he decided to avoid the confrontation for the time being. Li Hao picked up the weapons and practiced with each, just going through the motions, handling the saber, spear, staff, and stick without any real form. When he got to the sword, the little girl was waiting with eager anticipation, clenching her little fist and encouraging, "Brother Hao, go for it." What kind of response was that? Being idle is surely better than being overworked. But Lin Haixia had clearly made up his mind, and no matter how much Li Hao argued, it was futile. Finally, with a stern face, Lin Haixia took out a bamboo stick and threatened to hit him if he didn't obey. Li Hao wasn't afraid of pain, after all, given his current physical strength. Unless Lin Haixia really hit hard, it was nothing more than tickling. But seeing the other party taking it so seriously, he decided to avoid the confrontation for the time being. Li Hao picked up the weapons and practiced with each, just going through the motions, handling the saber, spear, staff, and stick without any real form. When he got to the sword, the little girl was waiting with eager anticipation, clenching her little fist and encouraging, "Brother Hao, go for it!" And Li Hao was speechless, casually swinging the sword a few times and finishing hurriedly. Lin Haixia's face darkened, seemingly seeing through the little guy's thoughts, and said, "None of these weapons pleased me today with your practice. You're not allowed to rest, and you're not allowed to touch that damn chessboard again." "Lin," Li Hao wailed. "Practice!" Lin Haixia gritted his teeth, ignoring Li Hao's pleas. Li Hao picked up a saber and started to play with it, but his mind wasn't on cultivation. Although he appeared serious, there was no method to his movement. Seeing Li Hao take an interest in the saber, Lin Haixia began to teach him move by move, starting with the simplest stances. Seeing how serious he was, Li Hao dared not practice at all. If Lin Haixia saw any promise or hope, he would be inspired daily, and there'd be no peace for Li Hao. So, as Lin Haixia taught, Li Hao kept nodding, claiming he understood. As soon as the saber was in hand, it was all over the place again. It was as if his hands and feet were saying, "Understand my foot." An afternoon passed, and Lin Haixia felt like cursing too. He couldn't even get the most basic saber technique right. Did this boy lack any martial arts insight at all? Seeing Li Hao take an interest in the saber, Lin Haixia began to teach him move by move, starting with the simplest stances. Seeing how serious he was, Li Hao dared not practice at all. If Lin Haixia saw any promise or hope, he would be inspired daily, and there'd be no peace for Li Hao. So, as Xianxia taught, Li Hao kept nodding, claiming he understood. As soon as the saber was in hand, it was all over the place again. It was as if his hands and feet were saying, "Understand my foot!" An afternoon passed, and Xianxia felt like cursing too. He couldn't even get the most basic saber technique right. Did this boy lack any martial arts insight at all? He hated his own incompetence, his inability to repay the commander's kindness. After forcing Li Hao to practice for half a month, Xianxia finally despaired and gave up. He told Li Hao that recent changes in the war in northern Yan meant he would have to leave soon. Li Hao looked at the man and knew he had given up hope. During this time, seeing the man's grief, Li Hao felt both touched and ashamed. The other party hated the chessboard, hated their own inability to teach, but never once hated Li Hao. Lin, do you think a person who can't cultivate martial arts, if they go down the path of body refinement and combine it with techniques, can become an expert? Sitting in the courtyard, Li Hao looked at the man drinking beside him and asked. Xianxia put the wine aside, thought for a moment, and said with utmost certainty, "Yes!" He then continued, "I have seen experts in the military with tremendous physical strength. Their spear techniques were virtually perfect. They can be considered among the strong." He turned his head to look at Li Hao, yet his gaze quickly dimmed. "Young master, I know you are intelligent and can endure hardship. If you go down the path of body refinement, you will surely manage, but your comprehension..." He didn't finish, feeling a deep sense of sorrow. The reason he had let Li Hao practice techniques was with this in mind. Li Hao looked at him with surprise and said, "I sleep till the sun is up high every day. Do you think I can endure hardships?" Xianxia shook his head slightly, a bitter smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. "I have seen how you play chess. I know you can endure hardships. It's just that you don't like to." From Li Hao, he saw the potential to become a top expert. That was intelligence, mindset, diligence. But the only things missing were the innate talent for martial arts and comprehension of martial art. These two were precisely the tickets to the world of martial arts. Without entering the gate, how could one talk about a superior seat? This also resulted in the abundant cultivation resources in Divine General Mansion being piled up in front of Li Hao, but amounting to nothing more than an empty mountain. Hearing Xianxia's words, Li Hao felt a bit astonished, turned his head and glanced at the man, then fell into silence again. As the night wind swept through, one continued to drink while the other silently watched the night sky, as if a shooting star streaked across whose falling star was that? 2 months later, Xianxia was leaving, saying his formal goodbyes to Li Hao. Li Hao waited for him in the inner courtyard, the vast yard empty. He had the servants of the inner courtyard withdraw to the outer courtyard, leaving only him to see Lin off. "Do you find it too quiet, Uncle Lin?" Li Hao, with hands clasped behind his back, asked with a smile. Xianxia sighed lightly and said, "I don't care for these superficial things. As for you, take good care of Juer. That girl has an extremely high talent for swordplay. She will surely achieve great accomplishments in the future. Treat her well, and she will protect you one day." At this moment, his eyes held a mix of complexity, size, and acceptance. He had completely given up on the idea of Li Hao learning martial arts. He had come to Divine General Mansion full of expectations and passion, hoping to use all his heart to properly mentor the young son of the commander, to repay a debt of gratitude. Now, he was leaving full of regrets and feeling desolate, a bit sad in his heart. Li Hao smiled faintly and said, "Uncle Lin, I don't have much to give you upon our meeting, but since you are leaving today, let me give you a small gift." "I don't need any gift, nor do I have the face to accept one. You just need to be well," said Xianxia, feeling somewhat comforted but uninterested in the gift mentioned by Li Hao, for he lacked nothing. Li Hao didn't speak, simply walking slowly towards the weapon rack. Xianxia was taken aback, watching him with confusion. Then he saw Li Hao slowly draw a sword from the rack. "This sword is for you, Uncle Lin. I am grateful for your guidance," Li Hao said softly. Then the sword moved. His posture was graceful like snowflakes, and the sword in his hand shone like the surging waves of an endless sea, instantly casting myriad intricate and beautiful sword blossoms, luxurious to the extreme. The ultimate, endless sea, tidal sword, skill! At that moment, the brilliant and dazzling sword light illuminated the entire empty inner courtyard, and it also shone in Xianxia's eyes, lighting up the dark and contracted pupils into a bright, snowy white. Xianxia finally left. However, unlike the regret and desolation he felt earlier, he left the Divine General Mansion nearly running, filled with an excitement that made his heart leap. He wanted to report the incredibly happy news to the commander at the border as quickly as possible. If they knew their child possessed a swordsmanship talent that arose once in 1,000 years, they would surely be immensely surprised and comforted. That one sword, Xianxia understood, yet did not fully understand. He recognized that sword technique, the most famous in the Li family's collection, the Endless Sea Tide Sword skill. But compared to those versions of the Tide Sword skill he had seen, even those at the perfect level, this one was not inferior and even had a special feeling. After searching his mind, he could only think of 2 words: complete. Even more flawless than perfect. Xianxia knew that beyond technical perfection, there was another deeper realm called perfection. But even for those immersed in a technique for decades, it was very hard to reach. Besides hard training, one also needed an extreme talent. Yet this world-shocking sword had now been displayed by Li Hao, a 6-year-old child. Even for those dazzling prodigies, to practice a technique to proficiency by the age of 6 was already extremely difficult. Moreover, Xianxia had never seen Li Hao practice swordsmanship, but without doubt, he felt Li Hao had been secretly practicing. However, whether poor or rich, every day only had 12 hours. In front of time, everyone is equal, and whenever he saw Li Hao, most of his day consisted of playing chess, playing around, wandering, daydreaming, eating, and drinking. He had never seen him practice swordsmanship, not even touch it. Even if he was secretly working hard, how much time could he possibly squeeze out? He asked Li Hao, "Why do you secretly practice swordsmanship? And why conceal this astonishing talent?" But Li Hao just smiled and shook his head without speaking. Xianxia thought of much, including those imperial family feuds and intrigues of noble families he had heard about, and he vaguely guessed something. Looking at Li Hao's quietly smiling face, Xianxia felt a twinge in his nose. He understood that if the man from the border returned, this child would not be without support. He could shine brilliantly, yet now he must hide and keep a low profile. If this child had not seen his sincerity, he probably would not have let him see this hidden true face. Thinking of this, Xianxia felt quite touched and consoled. This one sword had not only revealed Li Hao's talent and swordsmanship to Xianxia, but combining it with Li Hao's usual manner of speaking had also made him truly understand how smart this child really was. Xianxia left in a hurry, so much so that when he passed the front courtyard, he didn't even greet Bian Rushu. With Xianxia's departure, the courtyard returned to its usual tranquility. But now, being 6 years old, Li Hao needed to get up early every day to go to Eternal Spring Court to pay his respects to his aunt, which was a matter of etiquette. The purpose of this etiquette was to cultivate from an early age respect for teachers and the resolve to repay kindness. Bian Rushu, as Li Hao's fiancée since childhood, almost considered a member of the Li family, naturally had to accompany him in paying these respects. During these morning visits, it was inevitable to run into other children from various courtyards, though there were only 4 or 5 of them. All were around Li Hao's age. For instance, the second son and youngest daughter of 5th Lady, the orphan son of 6th Lady, the son and daughter of 8th Lady. The other children, either like Li Qianfeng and Li Wushuang with exceptional talent taken away by famous teachers, or older, enlisting in the military to strive for a career in the army. Like the son and daughter of the aunt, both in their 20s, serving as junior generals in the army, who would occasionally return if there was no warfare. But as members of the Li family, they had military discipline ingrained in their bones, strictly following it. Thus, the aunt barely saw her children throughout the year. After the morning respects, Li Hao and Bian Rushu were invited by the aunt, He Jianlen, to enjoy the nutritious breakfast she had prepared. After chatting casually with the dignified and graceful aunt for a while, the 2 small figures, one after the other, wobbled back to their own courtyard. Li Hao resumed his usual routine of daydreaming about chess. Bian Rushu practiced her swordsmanship in the courtyard. The high-quality sword technique Xianxia had taught her before leaving was enough for her to practice for several years. One would have thought this peaceful and harmonious time would just slowly continue to pass, until several days later, a sudden message drastically returned to the Divine General Mansion. Xianxia had come back. A warrior enveloped in heavy armor, with a robust body and a cold gaze, had brought Xianxia back, but only brought back one hand. When Li Hao heard the news from Zhao, he was stunned. The chess piece in his hand fell to the ground, but normally his eyes were only for chess pieces. Yet now, he didn't even glance at it. He didn't bother to put his boots on, and barefooted, he dashed out and rushed into the Eternal Spring Court. The maid at the door meant to report his arrival, but Li Hao had already dashed inside. Then, he saw within the main hall of the Eternal Spring Court, where he usually paid his respects in the morning, a soldier kneeling on one knee. Li Hao's heart trembled, and looking past this soldier, he saw a piece of red cloth on the ground in front of him, upon which lay a hand. At the point of severance, it looked torn, the flesh mangled and uneven. Wrapped in a blue sleeve, this was the clothing Lin Haixia wore when he left. This hand had, just a few days ago, tousled the little girl's hair. In his ear, this soldier was reporting to He Jianlin. Lin was ambushed by demons lurking on the road to northern Yan while passing through the national highway of Qi State. The stalemate on the northern Yan battlefield led to demons infiltrating various cities of northern Yan, attempting to disperse our army's forces, with other states also experiencing frequent demon attacks. Stop for a moment. He, Jianlan, interrupted the soldier. She was slightly distracted, watching Li Hao, who rushed into the hall barefoot and in haste. Then, thinking of something, a sigh appeared in her eyes as she instructed Shui Jian beside her. Take the arm away for now. Yes. Shui Jian nodded gently and then looked up at Li Hao, who had rushed in. This hand had, just a few days ago, tousled the little girl's hair. In his ear, this soldier was reporting to He Jianlan. Lin was ambushed by demons lurking on the road to northern Yan while passing through the national highway of Qi State. The stalemate on the northern Yan battlefield led to demons infiltrating various cities of northern Yan, attempting to disperse our army's forces, with other states also experiencing frequent demon attacks. Stop for a moment. He, Jianlan, interrupted the soldier. She was slightly distracted, watching Li Hao, who rushed into the hall barefoot and in haste. Then, thinking of something, a sigh appeared in her eyes as she instructed Shui Jian beside her. Take the arm away for now. Yes. Shui Jian nodded gently and then looked up at Li Hao, who had rushed in. Consumed! Li Hao's mind roared like thunder. His eyes suddenly reddened. His blood seemed to flow backward, rushing to his head. He could scarcely imagine the scene. How cruel it must have been. Having come to this world and resided in the Divine General Mansion, though he had heard quite a bit about demons from his surroundings, he had never truly seen one. Although he knew the battlefields were brutal, this was the first time he was facing this harsh reality so directly. Does that demon have a name? Li Hao asked in a low voice. The soldier replied, yes, that demon resides outside the city of Qi State and has self-proclaimed the title Tiger Robe Immortal. Li Hao silently engraved this name into his memory, a surge of indescribable killing intent welling up in his heart, but he controlled his emotions and asked no further, merely turning around, picking up the red cloth from the ground and covering the arm properly. Then Li Hao looked up at the family head. Fifth Lady, I have taken Uncle Lin's hand back. Excuse my rudeness today. Please don't be upset. Having spoken, he then turned around, holding the arm, and left barefoot. He, Jianlan's eyes flickered slightly. From Li Hao's actions, she sensed something unusual, seldom seen in the boy, an indication that he was more mature and astute than she had thought. Shui Jian, bring Cheng Ji's boots for Hao, He Jianlan instructed. Shui Jian nodded, went to the side room to find the boots, and just as she was rushing out of the courtyard, she saw that the small figure had already gone far, disappearing from view. Back at Mountain and River Courtyard, Li Hao found a spot and buried the arm. Then he fetched a wooden plaque, carved Lin Haixia on it, and placed it into the soil. He instructed Zhao, cordon off this area, no one is to step here. When Zhao learned that what was buried was Lin Haixia's remaining arm, he quickly advised, young master, this is the family head's courtyard. We shouldn't bury remains here. We have a hero's cemetery for burial of war heroes. Let's take Colonel Lin there. Let's prepare a ceremonial grave there for Uncle Lin. Li Hao shook his head slightly, surveying the courtyard. This vast mountain and river courtyard can accommodate Uncle Lin's hand. Young master. As Zhao was about to continue, Li Hao stopped him, leaving him no choice but to give up. Make sure to provide for Uncle Lin's family well, Li Hao said to Zhao. Zhao replied, as a military man, the northern Yan side should already be aware and will handle his family's situation properly. That is there. This is here. Li Hao glanced at Zhao. You should understand what I mean. Zhao paused, then nodded slightly. I understand. The death of Xianxia, much like a small stone thrown into the bottom of a lake, caused little more than a ripple within the Divine General Mansion. Life continued as usual in the other courtyards, but within Mountain and River Courtyard, Li Hao became even more engrossed in chess, even neglecting Bien Ruche's sword practice. He didn't tell the little girl about Uncle Lin to spare her the sorrow. Time flew by. One day, Li Hao awoke from his sleep, wherein he had been playing chess with Uncle Lin. Suddenly, a fierce tiger rushed in from outside the chessboard, knocking it over and pinning Xianxia to the ground by his neck. He sat up in bed, gasping for air. The little girl by his side woke up disturbed, her eyes sleepy as she rubbed her eyes and asked, Brother Hao, what's wrong? Li Hao came to his senses and shook his head. It's nothing. As the little girl fell asleep again, Li Hao covered her with the blanket that had slipped aside, then sat up and went to the window. Under the moonlight, words suddenly appeared before Li Hao's eyes. You have comprehended the spirit of chess. Seeing the prompt, Li Hao's heart did not overflow with too much joy. He had long cast aside utilitarian desires, focusing wholeheartedly on the game, and it was precisely because of this that he possessed a chess Tao state of mind. To use chess Tao as a tool for practicing martial arts, a concept he once held, was now something he could not accept. Even so, a part of him felt an impulse to directly invest these skill points into chess Tao. However, that severed arm, the man who drank wine, made him restrain such thoughts. Playing chess was indeed important, the thing he loved doing now, but there were some things he had to do, such as tearing the Tiger Robe Immortal into thousands of pieces. Nevertheless, that was a great demon of the fourth realm, and getting to the fourth realm was not something that could be achieved overnight. The only thing he could do now was to grow up quickly. Chess Tao state of mind was a state of mind, a condition. After obtaining the chess Tao state of mind, Li Hao spent the following days in his small courtyard busily immersed in chess. But now, he was not merely chasing the bit of experience one gets at the end of a game. He was truly enjoying every bit of the chess playing process. The ingenuity of every move, the layout, the contemplation, all deeply fascinated him, like playing a fun game, totally absorbed, with no desire to stop. Whether eating, sleeping, or watching the little girl train in swordsmanship, his mind was filled with thoughts of chess. This made Li Hao lose interest in almost everything other than chess. One day, Shuijian from Eternal Spring Court brought news that the matriarch had invited Bian Rushou to join the training facility of Divine General Mansion. It was the place where the descendants of the Li family cultivated. The descendants were like stars holding the moon in the training facility, their status much higher than the others. Similarly, for foundation, establishment, and blood-melting cultivation resources, they were at least a level above the others. Therefore, the disparity in martial arts talent between direct descendants and the others was significant. This resulted in, apart from a few just sensible direct-line youngsters, most of the other relatives being teenagers in their mid-teens, with talents ranging around 4 to 6 ranks, considered average, but capable of holding down a territory in the future. Those relatives with talent reaching the 7th rank would be given focused cultivation, enjoying resources close to those of direct descendants. After entering the training facility, Bian Rushou officially stepped onto the path of cultivation. That's when the terror of her 9-ranked battle body became evident. In just a few months, Li Hao saw the little girl advancing to the 4th level of the Power Passage realm. The descendants were like stars holding the moon in the training facility, their status much higher than the others. Similarly, for foundation, establishment, and blood-melting cultivation resources, they were at least a level above the others. Therefore, the disparity in martial arts talent between direct descendants and the others was significant. This resulted in, apart from a few just sensible direct-line youngsters, most of the other relatives being teenagers in their mid-teens, with talents ranging around 4 to 6 ranks, considered average, but capable of holding down a territory in the future. Those relatives with talent reaching the 7th rank would be given focused cultivation, enjoying resources close to those of direct descendants. After entering the training facility, Bian Rushou officially stepped onto the path of cultivation. That's when the terror of her 9-ranked battle body became evident. In just a few months, Li Hao saw the little girl advancing to the 4th level of the Power Passage realm. Some of the kids were tactless in speech, and it was unavoidable to provoke conflicts that might reach the adults, which would not look good. As the matriarch of Divine General Mansion, she sought peace and quiet, and Li Hao was content with this arrangement, enjoying the leisure. After all, for him, practicing martial arts was a waste of time. He had no interest in squabbling with those teenagers. Too dull. After playing so many games, haven't you learned anything? It's the same move that lost you 3 games already, Li Hao scolded the house servant playing chess in front of him. Some of the kids were tactless in speech, and it was unavoidable to provoke conflicts that might reach the adults, which would not look good. As the matriarch of Divine General Mansion, she sought peace and quiet, and Li Hao was content with this arrangement, enjoying the leisure. After all, for him, practicing martial arts was a waste of time. He had no interest in squabbling with those teenagers. Too dull. After playing so many games, haven't you learned anything? It's the same move that lost you 3 games already, Li Hao scolded the house servant playing chess in front of him. If the game was played poorly, the young master would get upset, causing the servant much distress. The 2 of you play terribly. You've been my opponents for so long and haven't improved a bit, Li Hao said, irritated. The servant hastily pleaded for forgiveness, while the other, as if remembering something, stealthily glanced at Li Hao and said, "Young master, I do know someone who plays chess. He's a 3rd-ranked house servant newly joined here." "Oh?" Li Hao raised an eyebrow and asked, "Where is he?" "In the woodshed, handling the chopping of firewood." If the game was played poorly, the young master would get upset, causing the servant much distress. The 2 of you play terribly. You've been my opponents for so long and haven't improved a bit, Li Hao said, irritated. The servant hastily pleaded for forgiveness, while the other, as if remembering something, stealthily glanced at Li Hao and said, "Young master, I do know someone who plays chess. He's a 3rd-ranked house servant newly joined here." "Oh?" Li Hao raised an eyebrow and asked, "Where is he?" "In the woodshed, handling the chopping of firewood." "Then what are we waiting for? Call him over so I can test him," Li Hao instantly said. "All right, young master," the house servant said joyfully, immediately taking his leave. Before long, a lean and skinny young man, dressed in servant's clothes, was brought before Li Hao. "What are you staring at? Haven't you seen the young master?" "Ah, yes. May the young master have peace." The lean young man hurriedly knelt down. Li Hao waved his hand slightly for the young man to rise and speak, pointing at the chessboard. "I hear you play chess. Play a game with me and let's see how well you do. If you're good, from now on, you'll stay at Mountain River Courtyard as a top-ranked house servant by my side." "Ah?" The lean young man clearly hadn't expected such a stroke of good fortune to fall upon him and was dumbstruck, then immediately exclaimed with joy, "Thank you, young master, thank you." After saying this, he wiped his hands on his clothes and sat down in front of the chessboard. Soon a game was laid out, and Li Hao took the white pieces in hand. Several moves into the game, Li Hao was already delighted. This skinny young man really could play chess, and he had quite some technique. Li Hao started to take it seriously too, making his moves without mercy. In just a short while, the young man's face turned pale, his forehead was beading with sweat, and fear could be seen in his eyes. In the end, his hand trembling slightly, he slumped low, staring at the chessboard in front of him, then at Li Hao, unable to believe it. Such a young child, so deeply versed in the ways of chess town. "I lost," said the lean young man with a complex expression as he stood up, his eyes betraying reluctance and a hint of subtle ferocity. Li Hao was in a daze. He came to his senses when he heard the young man's words and immediately started laughing. "Good, very good. From now on, you're a top-ranked servant in my courtyard. Just accompany me in chess every day." The lean young man was stunned, looking at Li Hao in amazement. But I lost!" Li Hao smiled. As soon as the game ended, it had prompted him that he gained experience, a whole 20 points. Normally, when playing chess with the 2 knuckleheads by his side, the most he'd get was 3 points. The difference was simply huge. This also showed that the more skilled the player in a chess match, the more experience he would get, rather than just rushing through game after game purely by volume. If every game yields 20 points, 10 games will be 200. To accumulate 5,000 points, only 250 games would be needed, and even if calculated at 10 games a day, it would only take a month. The more Li Hao thought about it, the more excited he became, his eyes looking more and more pleased at the lean young man before him. "If you can beat me, I can grant you 10,000 taels of gold," Li Hao said, encouraging him with a smile. The lean young man was shocked, his body trembling with excitement. Li Hao told him not to stand there in a daze and to sit and continue playing while instructing the two servants by his side to go prepare his registration and handle the transfer procedures. And so, Li Hao and the lean young man began a series of matches in the courtyard. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. One night, after dinner, Li Hao called the lean young man over for another battle. In the bedroom, under the nightlight, two figures, one large and one small, were locked in a chess battle on a board. "Young master." As Li Hao concentrated on plotting his next move, he suddenly heard the lean young man call out to him. But the tone was not the usual one that was slightly flattering and respectful. Instead, there was a strange tranquility to it. Li Hao looked up in confusion to see a glint of cold light shooting towards him straight at his face. His pupils shrank, and his body instinctively kicked back, retreating like lightning. Looking back at the chess table, the lean young man's one hand was lying on the board while the other maintained a stabbing gesture with a dagger, his face showing a hint of shock, obviously. He had not expected that his attack would be dodged by the young master. You... Li Hao came back to his senses. Everything had happened too suddenly and without warning. As he was shocked, his eyes swiftly turned icy cold, and he said in a chilling voice, "An assassination? Who sent you?" A woman from Shuiwa courtyard flashed through his mind, but Li Hao promptly dismissed that thought. After all, he was a cripple without any threat, and it seemed unlikely someone from inside would want to assassinate him. "How did you..." The lean young man's mind was in even greater disarray than Li Hao's, more shocked. Wasn't this child a useless person who couldn't cultivate martial arts? For all those days in the yard, accompanying Li Hao daily, he indeed had not seen him practice at all, not even once. To know, children of the Li family were expected to suffer through rough training at the age of 6. Yet, this disabled child spent every day playing chess in his own courtyard, ignored by everyone. The intelligence was not wrong, but it seemed outrageously so. Quickly, the lean young man reacted. His body exploded in movement, displaying a shockingly swift movement technique, lunging directly at Li Hao. He must not let the child cry out. His eyes were filled with ruthlessness and murderous intent. But on the other side, Li Hao's thoughts mirrored his. The assassin must not be allowed to cry out, or else too many would be alarmed. Kill. Seeing the onrushing figure, Li Hao did not dodge. Instead, he suddenly thrust out with his foot. His small frame burst forth like thunder, carrying a faint whistling sound in the action. As he got close, he tilted his head slightly to watch the dagger swipe past his eyes. At the same time, he delivered a punch to the enemy's belly. Li Hao had never engaged in physical combat with anyone since he had started his path of cultivation. This time, it was almost full power unleashed. A sound as heavy as a sandbag hitting the floor echoed. The lean young man's eyeballs nearly popped out as he was struck, curving like a shrimp and forced to fly backward, crashing in front of the chess table. Li Hao didn't know how much force was behind his own punch. But given he could lift up a 2-ton rockery, this forceful punch must have carried tens of thousands of pounds. As the young man was repelled, Li Hao quickly leaped forward. His small hand, like a hawk's claw, grabbed the other's throat and he said coldly, "Don't make a sound!" The lean young man? What's happening? The lean young man's mind was momentarily muddled, unable to discern who the assassin was. But feeling the tremendous force pressing against his throat, he came to his senses and looked at the little boy before him in alarm and fear. What kind of monster is this? Barely 7 years old, yet possessing such terrifying strength. Even at the 10th level of perfection in the power passage realm, plus the resurgence of the noble lord's divine blood, it shouldn't be so exaggerated, should it? Who sent you to assassinate me? Li Hao stared intently at the other party and asked, while various pieces of information surfaced in his mind. Playing chess was a means to approach him, indicating that the other party's purpose in coming to the Divine General Mansion was straightforward to assassinate him. The lean young man was somewhat silent, as the child before him displayed a strength and cognition far beyond that of an ordinary 6-year-old. He had thought he was sent to deal with a useless little thing, only to uncover such terrifying information. You're not a martial arts waste. Hiding your strength, is this your idea or your old man's arrangement? The lean young man asked, slightly squinting his eyes. Now that the assassination attempt had failed and he felt the enormous strength at his throat that could crush it at any moment, he knew he had no way out and became calm. Assassinating the direct bloodline of the Divine General Mansion was a task with very slim chances of survival. It's just a pity that the mission could not be completed. Do you know my father? Li Hao's eyes flickered slightly. You're joking. The lean young man said coldly. Who in the world does not know the Martial Marquis Xingwu? Currently, he is stationed at the Frontier Pass, and a few months ago, he gathered martial artists from Jianghu in northern Yan to assist in suppressing demons, commanding great respect with a single call. Assisting in suppressing demons? Li Hao furrowed his brows. Could it be that the situation in northern Yan had become so difficult that they had to rely on the strength of Jianghu martial artists? Are you sent by my stepmother? Li Hao asked. The lean young man was momentarily stunned, then suddenly realized, a sneer crossing his eyes. You've been the target of assassination? Unexpectedly, even within the iron-blooded Divine General Mansion, there's such decay. No wonder you're pretending to be useless. But speaking of which, I really haven't seen you train. How many hours do you practice every day? I've always been training with you. Li Hao calmly looked him in the eyes and said, you answer my question first, and then I'll answer yours. That's called an exchange. The lean young man slightly raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but laugh. This child was indeed interesting. Anyway, it's a sure death. You've made me fail my mission and doomed my family. Why should I tell you? The lean young man scoffed lightly. Li Hao said, because I can see that you don't want to die, you're also afraid of dying, and there are many ways to die. I can give you a swift death. The lean young man's smile vanished. He fell silent for a moment, and then slowly said, the one who sent me here is... Suddenly, his arm quivered, and he threw a punch at Li Hao's head. Li Hao slightly tilted his head and easily dodged it, not retaliating but just looking at him with cold eyes. The lean young man felt a chill as his heart sank. The gap was that big? He, a mighty Zhou Tian realm martial artist, seemed to have switched roles with this child. In front of him, he was like a child, completely seen through. The latter's contempt made him dispiritedly retract his hand. You truly are a monster. Spill it, Li Hao said coldly. You should know that the Li family is a martial family with countless captives and convicted criminals subjected to interrogation. The methods used are beyond your imagination. Impossible to wish for death. If possible, I can give you a swift end. The lean young man's eyes twitched slightly. Of course, he knew the child before him was not lying, and a sense of fear began to grow within him. If I tell you, can you let me go? The lean young man asked with a glimmer of hope, relying on the chance that the child in front of him still had a naive nature. I can, Li Hao answered. Spurt! The lean young man almost coughed up blood. Could you not be so blunt? It's so fake, it can't be faked anymore. Do you think I'm a child? He laughed bitterly and said, actually, telling you doesn't matter much. The assassination has failed, and my family won't survive either. I came from northern Yan, and the one who sent me to kill you is Monarch Bai. Monarch Bai? That's right. One of the 3 great demon gods of northern Yan with terrifying strength, and also your father's old adversary. The lean young man's eyes were complicated. Your father is a genius with his troops, and the Li family army is fearless and unstoppably strong. Northern Yan would have fallen long ago. At present, they've managed to hold the front, but Monarch Bai sent me to assassinate you. He wants your death to spread out from the Divine General Mansion, to reach the frontier pass of Northern Yan, to cause great disarray within your father's army. If he leaves the battlefield to return, Northern Yan will be conquered. How? With that, he looked intently at Li Hao. No one knew that this child was the key that could affect the life and death of tens of cities and hundreds of thousands of people in Northern Yan. Li Hao was stunned. So, it was because of Northern Yan. The warfare there had actually reached the Divine General Mansion. So far away. Your father commands the battles in Northern Yan. They are battle-hardened with no vulnerabilities, unassailable, and you are their only weak point, the softest spot. The lean young man continued, only by starting with you can they defeat your parents, make the frontier pass of Northern Yan fall, and let the demon army march straight in. Li Hao fell silent, digesting the other's words, and after a while, he slowly said, you are of the human race. Why would you work for the demons? The lean young man was slightly stunned, paused for a moment, then looked gloomily at Li Hao, his eyes filled with jealousy and hatred. Not everyone is as lucky as you. Even if I explained, you wouldn't understand. Is that so? Li Hao looked at him calmly. Since birth, my parents have been away, and I was betrayed by close relatives. Now, because of my parents, I face assassination. Do you still think my life is good? The lean young man's mouth opened slightly. He was stunned, at a loss for words, and could no longer speak. Li Hao did not say more, merely stating, I promised you I would grant you a swift death. Heh, you're quite a decent person, the lean young man recovered, forced a mocking smile and said, no matter what is said, in the end, death is inescapable. He had a hint of fear deep in his eyes. He didn't want to die, he was afraid of dying, or else, why would he end up taking orders from demons? Li Hao spoke as if he didn't understand the sarcasm. Actually, I don't want to kill you. Oh? The gaunt young man's eyes revealed a cold sneer, clearly not believing him. Because your chess skills are not bad, Li Hao said seriously. The gaunt young man was stunned. After a while, he came back to his senses, a bitter smile on his face. But the pity is, I've never won against you. Next life then. Li Hao began to exert force with his palm. In your next life, don't practice martial arts. Just play chess honestly. At least you'll live longer and more at ease. The gaunt young man wanted to struggle, but seeing Li Hao's indifferent and composed eyes left him in despair. He bitterly said, you really are a strange child. In the end, Li Hao still pinched him to death. As suffocation set in, the gaunt young man struggled violently again, but to no avail. After dealing with the assassin, Li Hao remembered that he still didn't know the man's real name, and the name of the house servant the man had used to sneak in was one bestowed by the Li family. However, it doesn't matter anymore. After the assassin died, Li Hao summoned the house servant, scaring him half to death. That night, the entire Divine General Mansion was shaken. The lights in each courtyard were lit, and the ladies of each courtyard, already in bed, hurried over in their clothes. Upon seeing the corpse of the assassin lying in front of the chess table, they were all incredibly shocked. How could an assassin infiltrate a place like the Divine General Mansion? He, Jianlan's normally graceful and composed demeanor, was gone, and she hugged Li Hao anxiously, touching and looking him over. Are you alright? Aunt, I'm fine, Li Hao reassured her. After confirming that there were indeed no injuries on Li Hao, He Jianlan, now reassured, questioned him closely, and Li Hao relayed the story he had thought up in advance. An assassin attacked, and in a critical moment, an old man intervened and killed him. Afterward, the old man disappeared. Li Hao thought to himself that since an assassin could infiltrate the Divine General Mansion, making up a story about an old man should also be no problem, right? After all, if you didn't even know about the assassin, then not knowing about other powerful experts is quite normal too, isn't it? After hearing Li Hao's story, He Jianlan was visibly shaken, immediately conjuring up some speculations. Could it be a military expert sent secretly by the Divine Martial Marquis? Or is it that elder from the clan? She suppressed the guesses in her heart and never doubted Li Hao's words. After all, no matter how mature Li Hao was, he was still a child under 7 years old. And having not stepped onto the path of martial arts, if there were no experts secretly protecting him, he would surely have died without question. He, Jianlan, then asked Shuijian to take Li Hao and the little girl beyond Rushu to rest at the Eternal Spring Court first, to recover from the shock. Meanwhile, she sat in the grand hall of the Mountain and River Courtyard, called over the house servant who had accompanied Li Hao while he played chess, and the first house servant who'd been startled awake by Li Hao's call, questioning them carefully in the yard. At the same time, she summoned the mansion's experts to examine the corpse of the assassin. It wasn't long before the entire course of events was learned from the house servant. When the assassin entered the mansion, how he revealed his talent in chess, performed in front of the Mountain and River Courtyard servants, and ingratiated himself with them, and so on. Clearly, the other party had gathered information about Li Hao, deliberately approaching him by playing chess, with everything leaving traces to follow. Later in the night, the examination results of the corpse were also out. The assassin was astonishingly at the Zhoutian realm, roughly between the 3rd and 4th levels. This level of cultivation, thrown out into the world, would be considered quite decent for a knight-errant, capable of upholding justice in Jianghu and gaining a bit of fame. However, In the Divine General Mansion, where powerful individuals abounded, it would be a very ordinary existence. Nevertheless, to kill a 6-year-old child, this level of cultivation was more than enough, even like using a cleaver to kill a mosquito, excessively overkill. Moreover, the assassin had consumed some kind of special pill that sealed his own sense of chi, which is why no one had detected him. Hearing this result, the ladies of the courtyards all felt chills of fear in waves. If the target of the assassin had not been Li Hao but their own children, they would undoubtedly have faced certain death. The sudden rise of a Zhou realm killer beside a child was terrifying. Lu Yue wrong. Upon hearing the results of the examination, slowly let go of the slight suspicion and speculation that had crossed her mind. Even if Li Hao's divine blood had not been ruined, it was not possible for him to kill the assassin on his own. It seemed that the couple, although stationed at the frontier pass, had made thorough preparations for their son. Realizing this, she felt secretly apprehensive. The matter of her drugging should have gone unnoticed since it took place in the Shuihua courtyard, and she also had formidable experts in her own courtyard at the northern Yan border, Yuan Yue City. Inside the city, the skies were filled with distress and dullness, while outside the city, the ground was scarred and pitted. Within a mountain forest 100 miles away, colossal figures with varying shapes lurked, casting a myriad of demonic shadows, along with some slender figures who had the appearance of humans sitting cross-legged on the peaks. There, one could faintly discern the ominous clouds amassed above the city and the vague silhouettes atop the walls. Monarch Bai. The youth with the black headband greeted with a slight bow, showing respect as he addressed the white-clad youth. I've just received news that the disposable flesh we sent earlier failed and even alerted the Divine General Mansion. Now the entire mansion is on high alert. They say there's a master secretly protecting the child. To fail at such a task? Worthless trash. Standing by, a robust and giant man's expression darkened, his lips parting slightly to reveal sharp teeth unlike those of a human. Didn't you say he had already infiltrated close to that child? There, one could faintly discern the ominous clouds amassed above the city and the vague silhouettes atop the walls. Monarch Bai. The youth with the black headband greeted with a slight bow, showing respect as he addressed the white-clad youth. I've just received news that the disposable flesh we sent earlier failed, and even alerted the Divine General Mansion. Now the entire mansion is on high alert. They say there's a master secretly protecting the child. To fail at such a task? Worthless trash. Standing by, a robust and giant man's expression darkened, his lips parting slightly to reveal sharp teeth unlike those of a human. Didn't you say he had already infiltrated close to that child? The beautiful woman gnawing on the arm frowned, stopping her chewing to cast a glance at the young man with the headband. Half a month has passed, and his identity surely has not been revealed. How could he have not found an opportunity to strike in all this time? A young man with yellow eyebrows spoke up with a furrowed brow. To prevent any misinformation from the Divine General Mansion, that Marquis Xingwu deliberately concealed the child's true circumstances. That's why we sent a flesh of the Zhou realm for this task. If a sudden punch was delivered from close range, not even someone at the 10th level of the Power Passage realm could avoid it, let alone if there is a master guarding at his side. They would not have time to react, right? The young man with the black headband sighed. We have no details on what happened, only that the creature turned out to be so useless. Not only did it fail, but it also alerted the Divine General Mansion. If this news reaches Li Tiangang's ears, he'll surely send more people to protect the child. Damn worthless thing, the burly man grunted angrily once again. The young man with the headband nodded slightly. The next assassination will only be more difficult. Since that flesh has failed, there's no need to keep its family alive. Let the little ones below have their fill. They've already been devoured. The beautiful woman bit off another finger and spoke while chewing. The young man with the black headband said no more, instead turning his gaze toward the white-clad youth who had stopped playing the zither, his eyes revealing a hint of awe. Monarch Bai, what should we do next? Shall we launch a direct assault? Monarch Bai's emotions seemed undisturbed as he continued to stare at Yuan Yue City in the distance, speaking softly. This Li family is indeed a tough bone to chew. If we were to launch a direct attack, our losses would be too great. Indeed, those scoundrels are unwilling to put in the effort. Damn them, the sturdy man said discontentedly. So, do we still go through with the assassination? The the youth with the black headband inquired. Monarch Bai turned to look at him and said, "What do you think?" And since Li Hao's attack, the vigilance at the Divine General Mansion had significantly increased. He, Jianlan, deployed powerful individuals from the inner court to guard the front court, and had every house servant who had entered the mansion in the past 3 years carefully screened. There was a lot of commotion surrounding this matter, but each court cooperated actively. After all, the assassination had been perilously close, and no one wanted the same to happen to their own child. After an investigation by the Li family's intelligence network, it was found that the assassination attempt was linked to the demons of Northern Yan. Li Hao sought out his aunt to keep the news of the assassination attempt from spreading to Northern Yan, from reaching that couple's ears so as to not affect the war on the front lines. Hearing Li Hao say this left He Jianlan in a daze, and as she looked at Li Hao's young face, her heart felt as if it was being tugged at something. The child had barely escaped assassination due to the conflicts in Northern Yan, yet still worried about its impact on the front. Truly a thoughtfulness that was heartrending. However, the commotion caused by the assassination was too significant, and keeping it a secret was impossible. News quickly reached the Northern Yan border. Marquis Xingwu, who was contemplating the military arrangements in the camp, was enraged, and Ji Qingqing was also uncontrollably furious. They immediately discerned the demons' intentions of using Li Hao's death to demoralize the army, compelling them to leave the Northern Yan battlefield. Should they abandon the front, this side would undoubtedly be met with a thunderous assault. Marquis Xingwu couldn't possibly ignore the battlefield here. In his rage, he immediately sent a trusted aide from his side back to the mansion to guard Li Hao closely. The mansion reported that the assassination attempt was thwarted by someone covertly protecting Li Hao, but Marquis Xingwu knew well that he had not assigned anyone to secretly guard Li Hao. With the mountain and river courtyard guarded and located within the Divine General Mansion, it never crossed his mind that someone would attempt to assassinate a child. If Li Hao had displayed extraordinary talent in martial arts, he would have concerned himself and sent someone to protect him secretly, to prevent the Li family's potential prodigy from perishing in the cradle. But for someone without martial arts talent, posing no threat, to nearly be harmed in such a manner. And all this was due to the damn stalemate before him. Several days later, at the Northern Yan battlefield, the Li family's army struck like lightning, purging a nest of demons overnight. The news spread, and all demons felt the Li family's wrath. Days eventually settled down and became calm again. Half a year passed, and Li Hao turned 7. The news of the assassination attempt had happened half a year ago, and by now, no one in the household brought it up anymore. In the meantime, the powerful protector sent back from the military by the Marquis of Xingwu had been following Li Hao closely for the past 6 months. A tall and upright middle-aged man who seldom spoke or smiled, acted cautiously and meticulously, and was named Li Fu. It was said that Li Fu was an abandoned infant many years ago, taken in by the Li family. People said that although the child's fate was tragic, ending up at the door of the Divine General Mansion was also seen as fortunate. That's why he took the Li surname and was given a single name, Fu. In his early years within Mountain and River Courtyard, Li Fu grew up alongside the Marquis of Xingwu. He was 7 or 8 years older than the Marquis of Xingwu. On ordinary days, he looked after the Marquis like an elder brother. But in the army, the two shared a senior-junior relationship. At the same time, Li Fu was also one of the Marquis of Xingwu's right-hand men, a person he trusted immensely. "Uncle Fu, you lost again." Inside the pavilion, as a game of chess concluded, Li Hao said with a grin. Li Fu's stern face revealed a hint of helplessness. "I am of the same generation as your father. You should call me uncle." "But calling you Fu uncle sounds like admitting defeat." Li Hao curled his lips. "When I play chess, I only want to win. I don't like admitting defeat." Li Fu found himself speechless, his superiors in the family hierarchy propelled by this silly wordplay. "You can also call me Uncle Li, but this is the Li family. There are too many with the Li surname. If I call you Uncle Li, I'm afraid you'll get confused," Li Hao said. Li Fu was once again at a loss for words. "If you ask me, you shouldn't have been named Fu. Since everyone says you are blessed, you should be called Li Yu." Li Hao said earnestly, "Look, the name Li. You sound so nice. You have. It's as if you have everything, corresponding to perfection." Li Fu felt an urge to knock on the boy's little head. Unlike the Marquis of Xingwu's by-the-book nature, This son of his was slick and smooth-talking. Stop talking nonsense. If your father were here, he would certainly spank you for being disrespectful, Li Fu scolded with a stern face. But he isn't here, Li Hao casually remarked. Li Fu wanted to discipline him a bit to prevent him from becoming increasingly unruly, but this indifferent comment made his heart tremble. When the Marquis of Xingwu went on a campaign back then, he had also been by his side and naturally knew that this year Li Hao was 7, and so the Lord had been in Northern Yan for 7 years. The situation in Northern Yan made it difficult for Ji Qingqing, who initially accompanied him with the intention of swift victory, to leave. She couldn't neglect her husband's danger. The child before him had been without his parents' company for 7 years. It must have been hard, right? Li Fu felt a pang of sympathy and his heart softened. He sighed. Your father has his difficulties too. Don't blame him. I never blamed him, Li Hao said seriously. Li Fu looked into his eyes. His heart warmed slightly, feeling somewhat gratified. You're very sensible. Sensible? Li Hao cracked a smile. Just then, a half-grown figure returned to Mountain and River Courtyard. Li Hao turned to look and saw Bian Wuxia coming back from practice at the martial arts training ground. The little girl had now turned into a young lady. Her tender face couldn't hide her beauty. Why are you back so early today? Are you hungry? Li Hao called out with a smile. Upon seeing Li Hao, Bian Wuxia walked over with her sword in arms, her expression somewhat sullen. I'm not hungry, she muttered. What? Did someone upset you? Li Hao teased. Bian Wuxia clenched her teeth slightly, turned her little face away, and did not speak. Walked over with her sword in arms, her expression somewhat sullen. I'm not hungry, she muttered. What? Did someone upset you? Li Hao teased. Bian Wuxia clenched her teeth slightly, turned her little face away, and did not speak. Li Hao had asked casually, but seeing her reaction, he raised his eyebrows slightly. Tell me what happened. It's nothing. Bian Wuxia got up, hugged her sword, and ran off, heading to the place where she usually practiced her swordsmanship. Li Hao thought for a moment, then summoned the female attendant who accompanied her in sword practice and asked, what happened to Zhuer? To report to the young master, Miss Zhuer was defeated in a swordsmanship contest at the martial arts training ground. Despite Li Fu being present, the attendant still maintained a respectful demeanor, even though she knew that this young master was unfit for martial arts. Just that little thing? Li Hao was relieved and said, so what if she lost once? As a martial artist, winning and losing are common in the military profession. She'll just have to win next time. What, can't she accept losing? The attendant hesitated, then said, lowering her head, no, young master. The one who defeated the young lady was rather despicable, running down the young master in front of her, which is why the young lady is so upset. Ah? Li Hao hadn't expected the issue involved himself. Was the little one taking up his cause? Li Hao glanced at the young girl in the distance, who was now practicing her swordsmanship, but looking visibly agitated. His eyes flickered slightly, and he told the attendant, I understand. You may go now. After the maid had left, Li Hao did not continue playing chess, but stood up and walked over to the courtyard. Li Fu also stood up. When Li Hao did not speak to him, he reverted to his expressionless military demeanor, like a silent shadow, faithfully following behind Li Hao. Li Fu had asked the servants about the previous assassination attempt, had learned the details thoroughly, and felt a trace of fear. Especially these days of accompanying the child and playing chess, he was keenly aware that the position he was now sitting in was precisely where the assassin had been, separated by only a chessboard. At such a distance, to exploit a child's full array of openings at a moment of inattention could mean death in an instant. But such an assassination had been stopped. It was uncertain whether to call the assassin incompetent or the clan elder who intervened terrifyingly formidable, or perhaps the child was truly blessed with a large fortune. Therefore, Li Fu took it as a lesson, clinging closely to Li Hao's side during meals, drinks, and sleep, scrutinizing any house servant or maid who approached within 3 feet of Li Hao with a hawk-like gaze. This caused the servants and maids in the courtyard to secretly groan. Every time they reported something to the young master, they did so with trepidation. Scarcely daring to lift their heads, they were nearly becoming introverted. Seeing Li Hao approaching, Bian Ruche slightly pursed her lips and turned her body away as if she did not want Li Hao to see her. Li Hao looked at her aggrieved demeanor and smiled warmly, ordering a servant to bring over a small stool and some cakes and fresh fruits, then sat down beside her and began to eat. Practicing swordsmanship with a distracted mind, you can't beat anyone like this, Li Hao said with a smiling tone upon seeing the girl waving her sword chaotically, clearly distracted. Bian Rushue's eyes suddenly reddened a bit, and she stopped practicing. Looking down, she said, "If only Brother Hao could cultivate with your intelligence, you would definitely surpass me in swordsmanship and become the most outstanding one." Having trained in the martial arts field for a year, Bian Rushu had improved rapidly. And as she grew up, her understanding deepened. She began to comprehend why, after the bone measurement, the adults looked at Li Hao with that kind of expression. And she also understood what Li Hao had truly lost in that year. Hearing Shuer's words, Li Fu's brows furrowed slightly. A hidden sorrow and pity briefly showed in his emotionless eyes. This was not only a regret for the Li family, but also for the Divine General Mansion. Li Hao felt a bit helpless. He had not grieved for himself, yet the young girl seemed sadder in comparison. "Don't say that," he consoled. Li Hao comforted her. "Practicing swordsmanship is so boring. Look at you, bearing wind and sun every day, enduring the hardest days of winter and summer. How tiring that must be. Unlike me, eating chilled melon in the pavilion during summer, playing chess, and in winter, curling up in bed to stay warm, sleeping until the sun is high in the sky. Now that's what I call happiness." Emma. Li Fu couldn't help but glance at the boy. These indeed sounded like his kind of words. Without the Divine General around, the other ladies of the mansion could not discipline him too severely, and Li Fu had realized upon his return that the child had adopted a somewhat cynical outlook on life. "You're not afraid of hardship," Bian Ruche said, lifting her head. "What do you know?" Li Hao responded with annoyance. "Look at me now, too lazy even to stand when I can sit, and to sit when I can lie down. Some hardships are meaningless. Otherwise, why would we have sweets? You're still young, you don't understand, just focus on your sword practice." "Don't talk nonsense." Li Fu couldn't listen anymore and interrupted sternly. What kind of absurd talk was this? That enduring hardship was meaningless. Which soldier at the border was not enduring hardships? As a martial artist, the last thing to fear is hardship. The only fears were lack of talent and resources. This young master, comfortably unaware of his own blessings, lacked talent yet loathed hardship, not taking his own learning seriously, and now he was potentially leading astray. The young Shuer, how could this be tolerated? Bian Ruche's talent in the way of the sword was something Li Fu acknowledged. She was exceptionally talented and destined to achieve greatness in swordplay. In the future, she would become a protective umbrella for Li Hao, and he could not let this mischievous young master undermine his future ally. "Fu, I think Hao is right." Bian Ruche hastily spoke up for Li Hao. Li Fu's eyes bulged with frustration. The young girl was too influenced by Li Hao's words. If she truly got led astray by him, it would be disastrous. "Don't spill such nonsense to Shuer. You think just because I wouldn't dare beat you? If I did, even your father would approve." Li Fu controlled his impulse to scold the well-behaved orphan girl, and instead threatened Li Hao sternly. Li Hao gave a sheepish smile, knowing well that he found no common ground in this respect with the stern and rigid servant. And besides, the Divine General Mansion was a family of soldiers. The Li family had always advocated frugality and the spirit of enduring hardship. Despite the fact that the ladies of various houses dined and dressed sumptuously, envied by all, in accordance with the standing and the foundation of the Divine General Mansion, they could actually live even more lavishly. The great lady, he's online for many years, eating vegetarian meals twice a week. Although not Buddhist, as a soldier who had taken countless lives, she did not say she did it for religious reasons, but rather to remind herself and her children not to get lost in this opulent luxury and forget the duty and spirit of a soldier. Yes, you're right, Fu, Liao agreed. To Shuer, he said, "See, you made Fu angry. You should hurry up and practice your swordplay." Zhuor blinked her small eyes and pouted slightly. It was clearly Hao who provoked the anger. However, she did not argue. If she'd take Fu's anger on behalf of Hao, she was willing to do so. Hearing Liao's shameless remarks, Li Fu was about to laugh in exasperation, rolling his eyes. This boy was indeed too difficult to discipline. "Fu, can you help take a look and give some pointers to Shuer's swordsmanship?" Li Hao asked Li Fu. Li Fu said indifferently, "I use a knife, not a sword." "The knife and sword are similar. The difference is not significant," Liao said with a smile. "What do you know? To train a weapon to perfection, even the slightest difference can lead to infinite variations," Li Fu said irritably, but then restrained his temper thinking that it was only natural for this kid, who did not understand martial arts, to see it that way. Li Hao felt a bit helpless and continued to munch on fresh fruits, with one leg casually crossed over the other, watching Schwer practice swordsmanship. There's something wrong with your swirling style, he commented. Halfway through watching, Li Hao casually offered Bian Rouche some tips. If you drop your arm a bit lower, it would look better. Don't talk nonsense, you're going to distract Schwer, Li Fu scolded, frowning. An amateur value an expert? This would be preposterous. However, Bian Rouche ignored Li Fu. She was used to Li Hao's casual suggestions. Even though Li Hao had embarked on the path of martial arts, she found that practicing, as he suggested, always felt smoother. At that moment, as she lowered her arm and used the swirling style again, she indeed felt an understanding and ease in her heart. Li Fu uttered a light, huh, not because Bian Rouche actually followed Li Hao's advice. After all, the young lady was too compliant with Li Hao because, as Li Hao said, a slight change in posture indeed added a bit more fierceness to the sword's momentum. He glanced down at the kid who was munching on fruit and sitting with his legs recklessly crossed. Was it a fluke? Or was he judging by what looked good? You need to use force in your waist. For a swirling style with a long slash, it's not just the hands that need force. The waist must drive the arms to swing out, Li Hao suggested again. Bian Rouche nodded slightly, then executed the move several times in a row, finally grasping the essence of it. The sword's momentum created a breeze. Its power was visibly greater than before. Li Fu raised his eyebrows in astonishment. One time could be a coincidence, but not twice. But this kid actually understands swordsmanship and possesses a talent for it. Although Li Fu was not fond of Li Hao's disposition, he had to admit that over the past half year, this kid had shown great intelligence, as well as maturity and wisdom beyond his peers. Could be that he actually had talent for swordsmanship but couldn't display it because he was forbidden to practice martial arts. Thinking about this possibility, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sorrow. If that were true, what a regret it would be. With Li Hao's casual tips, Bian Rouche's sword technique gradually approached perfection. There was no helping it. With Li Hao's understanding of swordsmanship, just by watching for a few moments, he could integrate Bian Rouche's superior sword technique into his panel and directly achieve a level of near perfection. With his perfect level understanding to compensate for any flaws, he even skipped the perfect stage. As long as Bian Rouche grasped a bit of it, she could achieve a might comparable to perfection. Next, Li Hao asked the young lady to perform for him the move she had failed to counter during their previous sparring. Bian Rouche obediently complied. Li Hao understood immediately upon watching and even imagined the scene of how his opponent had defeated him. However, he kept it to himself, considering that Li Fu was there. It wouldn't matter, he showed a little bit of his understanding of swordsmanship, but getting too detailed would be too freakish. This sword move isn't good looking. I think the downward slash here should be changed to a sloping chop, and the elbow should be lifted behind, he said. It's better to switch from chopping to a straight thrust here, and don't shake your wrist, he pointed out casually. Bian Rouche was puzzled, but listened carefully, slowly comprehending Li Hao's words, and then practiced again according to his suggestion. After several repetitions, she gradually came close to what Li Hao had described. Li Fu glanced at Li Hao, and was now convinced that Li Hao also possessed an extremely high talent for swordsmanship. Although the kid expressed himself in an amateurish way, merely correcting Bian Rouche's form by what looks good and doesn't look good, being able to perceive the aesthetic of weaponry at such a young age was a talent in itself. After all, in the eyes of a genius, some things appear as a different landscape. Li Fu sighed inwardly, feeling increasingly sorry for Li Hao. The next day, the two went to the Eternal Spring Court for their morning visit, and afterwards, Bian Rouche hurried excitedly to the martial training ground. After the morning training and lessons at the martial training ground had ended, Bian Rouche found the young man from the previous day, the one born out of wedlock. Clutching a sword nearly as tall as herself, her little face brimmed with seriousness as she requested another challenge. Upon hearing Bian Rouche's words, the young man couldn't help but burst into laughter. The other young men born out of wedlock who were crowding around him also mocked and ridiculed her. They didn't dare provoke the other legitimate children too much. Bian Rouche was, after all, not a member of the Li family by blood. She was only betrothed to someone from the family, and the marriage hadn't even taken place yet. Besides, that someone in the family was already known as a useless person within the Divine General Mansion, and any one of them would surpass him in the future. That's why they naturally disliked the one sitting on a treasure round, enjoying endless resources and affection. Didn't Bai beat you yesterday? Haven't you learned your lesson? Want to stand up for that piece of trash? If you've got the guts, tell him to come himself. Bai doesn't even need to lift a finger. I could take that trash with both hands tied. Bai already showed you mercy yesterday, and you still don't appreciate it. You do have talent, but Bai has been training here for 8 years. If you want revenge, you might stand a chance in half a year, but by then, Bai will probably no longer be here. Bian Rouche bit her lip, but continued to stare earnestly at the young man in the middle. Do you dare or not? Her words instantly fired up the young man's blood, Chi. The young man called Bai, formerly known as Li Dongbai, was one of the 3 most talented among the illegitimate children at the training ground, with a 7th grade battle body. Enjoying resources close to those of the legitimate children, he already stepped into the Dotian realm. However, the martial training ground's regulation for skill competition required that the strong party suppress their cultivation level to the same realm as the weaker party. In Bian Rouche's current cultivation level, we're at the 10th level of perfection in the power passage realm. Today, I'll make sure you lose clearly and unmistakably. Li Dongbai's eyes were cold. He hadn't planned on provoking this girl with exceptional talent. He was simply chatting with his companions about something, and upon mentioning a trash in passing, he expressed a few opinions and somehow been sought out by this girl. Although an illegitimate son, he too had pride and obviously wouldn't apologize. Thus the competition yesterday. Come on. Li Dongbai took his position on the stage in the martial training ground. Soon, the area around the stage was crowded with people, all eager to see the sparring between these two illegitimate young prodigies and that extraordinary talented girl. On the outside of the arena, the martial training ground's instructor, that old military veteran, squinted his eyes and smiled, encouraging the spirited competition among these young folks. A good sword is forged from constant sharpening. Without struggles during their youth, how can they experience setbacks? How can they progress? They certainly can't wait until they are his age, an old bag of bones, to start fighting for their lives. Soon, two figures, one large and one small, were locked in intense combat within the arena. The same scene had been witnessed by the old military veteran just the day before, and today's difference was not significant, except that Li Dongbai was striking with a few more degrees of ferocity. It seems that Shuai is going to lose again, thought the old military veteran. After all, her training is too short. Though she has exceptional talent, she still needs tempering. Just then, inside the arena, the figures crisscrossed, and the fiercest sword technique was executed. With a zooming sound, a sword flew out, tumbling to lay outside the platform, where it was skewered in sand. The figures on the platform were also frozen in place, frozen with them were cheering and jeering voices from below the platform. And also, the smile on the face of the old military veteran, Bian Rushu won. With a single stroke, she sent Li Dongbai's sword flying, while simultaneously thrusting her own blade to halt just half an inch from her opponent's throat. The young man was so shocked that he stiffened. When he finally collected himself, he quickly retreated several steps, staring at the girl fearfully. This scene was beyond everyone's expectations. They stared at Bian Rushu, incredulous. Li Dongbai, after 8 years of cultivation here, had been defeated by a little girl who had only cultivated for 1 year. Was this the disparity of talent? Bian Rushu withdrew her sword, her young face blooming with a radiant smile she had won. She then looked up at the boy before her and said earnestly, "I want you to apologize to Brother Hao." Please apologize to that useless guy? Li Dongbai came back to his senses, his face instantly flushing with shame. He gritted his teeth and said, "I admit that I lost you, but I will not apologize." You, Bian Rushu furrowed her brows, unsure of what to do. She thought for a moment and said, "If you won't apologize, I'll just have to beat you again." Childish. Anger, Li Dongbai turned and ran off the platform. Sensing the gazes of others, he said nothing and ran straight out of the practice arena. The veteran in the army didn't stop the youth's departure. Some lessons needed to be learned on one's own after a setback. Instead, it was the little girl who drew his admiration. The finesse of her swordplay was already very close to perfection. This was no ordinary swordsmanship, it was of a high grade and quite difficult to master. The 9-tiered battle physique bestowed only the speed of cultivation, not the speed of technique mastery, which highlighted Bian Rushu's sword talent as rare and exceptional, just like her cultivation aptitude. Did she really tap into her potential just because of a small defeat yesterday? The veteran couldn't help but chuckle to himself. In the arena, the children of lesser branches watched the girl's figure with complex expressions in their eyes. They not only witnessed Li Dongbai's proud defeat, but also recognized the disparity between themselves, children of the lesser branches, and those from the major courtyard. "Sure, you're amazing." Several small figures ran towards Bian Rushu as she stepped off the platform, two siblings from 5th courtyard and Li Yuanjiao from 6th courtyard. They were the same age as Bian Rushu, with only a few months difference. The youngest was Li Yun's sister, Li Jining, who had just turned 6 this year and recently arrived at the practice arena. And their sister, Li Wushuang, had already left the manor cultivated with famous master. It is Brother Hao, who is amazing, Bian Rushu thought to herself. The 3 children gathered around Bian Rushu, chattering excitedly about the thrilling battle. Li Yun, Li Wushuang's brother, was the most exuberant. "Sure, do you want some milk crisp cakes?" Suddenly, Li Yun produced a wooden box, beautifully decorated on the outside, and gently opened it to reveal a fragrant, milky aroma wafting out, with soft, white as jade pastry inside. "Here, have these." Bian Rushu leaned in and sniffed, enticed by a pleasant aroma. Her eyes sparkled with delight as she happily asked, "All for me? If you like them, take them all," Li Yun said with a wide grin. "Thank you." Bian Rushu didn't forget to express her gratitude as she took the treats. The time had come to end the day's cultivation. She waved her hand and walked away with the lunchbox in one hand and her sword cradled in the other. Li Yun watched her departed figure, chuckling goofily. Next to him, his sister Li Jining looked up, her face etched with confusion. "Brother, wasn't that prepared by Mother for you? I haven't even tried it yet." "If you want some, Mother can make more for you later. Sure hasn't had any yet," Bian said nonchalantly with a silly smile. Li Jining huffed, pouting her cheeks and turned to leave with a hint of jealousy. "Ning Ning, you can have mine," said the short, style Yuanjiao, rushing over with a beaming smile. "I don't want your hand-me-downs," the little girl retorted, slapping his offering away, still in a huff. In the pavilion, Li Hao's chess game was only halfway done when he heard Bian Rushu coming back. He glanced over idly and, seeing the unmistakable smile on the girl's face, he already knew the outcome and continued to focus on his move. "What's got you so happy? Share it so I can be happy too." "I won," said Bian Rushu as she dashed into the pavilion full of high spirits. She eagerly fixed her sparkling eyes on Li Hao as if waiting for praise for her achievements. Li Hao chuckled and placed another piece. As expected of Shuai, impressive. "I?" With that praise, the little girl's smile bloomed even more broadly. "You go ahead and play, Brother Hao. I'll give you something delicious to eat in a bit," she said. "Oh?" Li Hao noticed the wooden box in her hand, but he asked no further question and continued his chess battle with Li Fu, quickly bringing a game to an end. Li Fu's chess skills were only average among amateurs, far from a professional level, which meant that whenever Li Hao played against him, he could only gain 1 or 2 points of experience. As a result, he couldn't help but ruefully think that the assassin had struck too soon. What's the good stuff? And Li Hao turned around carelessly and looked at the wooden box beside him. Bian Rocher put down her sword on the chair, carried the food box to the table, opened the lid, and a scent of milk wafted out. "Someone gave me these milk cakes! They look really tasty!" "Brother Hao, would you like to try some?" "Who sent them?" Li Hao didn't immediately take one, but asked with a sense of caution. Bian Rocher was taken aback, thought for a moment, then shook her head. "I forgot to ask his name, but Brother Hao, you should know him. It's the one we often run into when we go to greet the head lady in the morning." "Those kids?" Li Hao was surprised. Li Fu gave him a look. "I have to say, aren't you a kid yourself?" But he longer used to Li Hao's old-fashioned way of speaking. "Uh-huh." Bian Rocher nodded. Li Hao felt a bit more at ease. "You girl, you've been training in the martial arts field with him for a year already. How could you not remember their names?" Bian Rocher looked at him with a hint of brilliance. "They never told me their names." "They definitely have, and even if they haven't, the attendants around them would mention it." "It's just that you haven't been paying attention," Li Hao remarked, annoyed. "Then I will ask again next time," Bian Rocher said with a sullen face. "You should be more sociable or you'll get bullied in the future," Li Hao advised her. "Nonsense." Bian Rocher immediately raised her head, her face showing a hint of pride. "Teacher said I have great talent and will become very strong in the future. Then I'll protect Brother Hao and I won't let anyone bully you again. Just take good care of yourself." "I haven't been bullied," Li Hao replied, considering that his own daily life in the courtyard, chess playing and strolling, was too comfortable, almost like he had retired early. "Boy, Shuer is offering this with all her heart. What's with your attitude?" Li Fu couldn't stand it and scolded. Li Hao looked at him helplessly. The guy wasn't that old, in his 40s. He acted like an old traditionalist, not bothering to argue. Li Hao turned to him and said, "Fu, you try it first. Test for poison. Although those kids aren't bad people, I'm worried they could be used by someone else." Li Fu nodded slightly, then took another look at Li Hao. This youngster always gave off mixed feelings. Sometimes he was meticulous, at other times he seemed clueless. After taking a bite of the fragrant cake, Li Fu then closed his eyes. A moment later, as Li Hao was getting impatient, he asked, "How is it? There shouldn't be an issue, right? Say something, Fu." "It tastes good," Li Fu opened his eyes and said. Li Hao rolled his eyes at him and immediately told Bian Rocher, "Hurry up and eat before it gets cold." He also picked up a piece and started tasting it. It did taste good indeed, and he said, "It's somewhat like Fifth Lady's craftsmanship." After taking a bite of the fragrant cake, Li Fu then closed his eyes. A moment later, as Li Hao was getting impatient, he asked, "How is it? There shouldn't be an issue, right? Say something, Fu." "It tastes good." Li Fu opened his eyes and said. Li Hao rolled his eyes at him and immediately told Bian Rocher, "Hurry up and eat before it gets cold." He also picked up a piece and started tasting it. It did taste good indeed, and he said, Was it Li Yun who sent you this, or his sister Li Jining?" "It was Brother Yun." Bian Rocher could still distinguish between brother and sister. "Next time tell that kid to bring more. This little amount, who's it enough for?" Li Hao devoured his half rapidly, but left the other half for Bian Rocher. Bian Rocher nodded, registering it in her mind. Li Fu shook his head discreetly on the side. At such a young age, why did this boy have such an air of shamelessness about him, which was quite distinct from the solemn and respectful style of the Li family manner, somewhat like Fifth Lady's craftsmanship? Several days later, the Divine General Mansion suddenly welcomed a distinguished guest. There was a bit of commotion inside the mansion, and the ladies of each court, upon receiving the news, hurried to visit, learning that the guest was none other than that person from the Sword Saint. If they could establish some connection and have their children become his disciples, their future would surely be remarkable. Among them, the concubines were especially active. Their children's training resources couldn't compare with those of the legitimate family, so a lot of the best opportunities had to be fought for on their own. He, Jian Lan, entertaining the guest in Eternal Spring Court, felt the frequent flitting of figures outside and understood their motives. She wasn't blaming anyone, but when she heard what the rumored Sword Saint said, her face showed a touch of surprise. After talking for a while, he, Jian Lan, nodded slightly, stood up, and accompanied the guest to see them off. Soon after, Mountain and River Courtyard welcomed its long-lost liveliness as a big group of figures approached. Li Hao, playing chess in the pavilion and hearing the disturbance, was puzzled and then saw the leading head lady with a long, white-haired old man beside her. The old man had sharp eyebrows and prominent cheekbones, giving off a very robust and lean impression. Next to this unfamiliar old man was another elder, one from the martial training ground that Li Hao had seen several times and was fairly familiar with. "What's going on?" Li Hao didn't understand the situation. Li Fu, sitting opposite him, saw the white-haired elder and his pupils shrank in shock. Then he stood up quickly. As he felt astonished, he suddenly thought of something and became secretly excited. Li Hao seldom saw Fu so stirred up and realized immediately that this unfamiliar elder must be a very important figure. However, there weren't many who could make the Li family treat them with such regard. Looking at the unfinished game, Li Hao felt a bit reluctant, but had to set it aside for now and waited silently. Li Fu. He, Jianlan, saw Li Fu and immediately beckoned to him lightly, then called out to Li Hao. Howard, come over here. Li Hao had to stand up and walk over. Where's Yuer? He, Jianlan asked again. Li Hao pointed to another part of the courtyard. She's practicing her swordsmanship over there. Shuejian, go call Xuer over. He, Jianlan commanded a maid standing by her side. Sword Saint Senior, this is the child of Tiangang, Li Hao. While the maid went to call Bian Rushu, he, Jianlan, introduced him to the white-haired elder beside her. Speaking of Howard's name, it was granted by Emperor Yu. What do you think of this child? When Emperor Yu was mentioned, the white-haired elder glanced at the woman and immediately understood her intentions, feeling slightly displeased. But he said nothing and began assessing the young boy before him. Li Hao was also looking up and sizing up the other party. When he heard the title the elderly lady used for the old man, he was somewhat surprised and understood why Fu's reaction had been so significant. Previously, while searching through chess manuals at Listening Rain Tower, he had also come across interesting stories and deeds of significant figures in Jianghu. In the records of Jianghu, figures from the past century, only 3 were known as sword saints. One resided in southern Sword Hut, one had retired in the Green Lakes amid the yellow sands of the North Desert, and another was like a dragon seen in head but not in tail. All 3 were masters of swordsmanship, startling the world with their swords, revered as sword saints. Which of the 3 sword saints was the strongest had been a perpetual topic of debate for enthusiasts over the past 100 years. His own third uncle, possessing extremely high talent in sword Dao, had cleaved half of the Jianghu and Demon Forest of Jingzhou with a single sword stroke and yet had not been entitled as a sword saint, which spoke volumes of this old man's terrifying strength. He wondered, which one of the 3 was he? As their gazes met, Li Hao immediately saw in the old man's eyes a deeply hidden sword intent, profound as the sea and abyss. Yet this sword intent was concealed beneath dark and placid eyes, imperceptible unless one had a second-level understanding of the sword Dao. I hear the child of Tiangang has failed in both foundation establishment and blood melting and lacks martial arts talent? Jian Wudao coolly looked down at the child before him. The Kailan children of the Divine General Mansion were regarded as extremely prestigious, second only to the imperial heirs, but to him, they were nothing significant, and there was no need to show deference to a mere child. He, Jianlan's face stiffened slightly as she nodded. Correct. Hence, I wanted to see Sword Saint Senior if this child has the talent for swordsmanship. If, in the future, he can engage in body cultivation and learn the sword, it would be his way of serving the nation and guarding a region for Daiyu. And at the mention of guarding, Jian Wudao's expression shifted slightly, softening a bit. Given his status, as long as the older generation of the Li family did not intervene, he did not need to concern himself with the thoughts of the younger generation. But the Li family's great achievements over thousands of years indeed commanded respect. Especially in recent decades when occasional turmoil at the Frontier Pass saw 6 of the 9 sons of the Li family fallen in battle, a fact solemn enough to command profound respect. Let's observe together in a while, Jian Wudao calmly said. He, Jianlan, was delighted, nodding her head. Soon, Bian Rushe was brought before everyone by Shuejian, the little girl obviously nervous before the crowd of adults. She instinctively stood behind Li Hao, using him to shield half of her body. This scene was familiar to her. It had occurred during Li Hao's foundation, establishment, and bone measuring, only the expressions of those adults afterward had made her feel sad. Sword Saint Senior, this is the Sword Dao prodigy I mentioned to you on behalf of Bai Jing, said an elder from the military, moving forward with small steps and speaking respectfully as soon as Bian Rushu arrived. Jian Wudao nodded slightly. He had come mainly because his third disciple had tirelessly entreated him, talking about the maiden from the Divine General Mansion as if she were something miraculous. Having a fondness for talent, he had then descended from the Sword Cottage for a visit to this flourishing age. Power passage, realm level 10, perfection, robust skeletal structure, not bad. Jian Wudao identified the young girl's cultivation realm in a glance, his eyes showing satisfaction. Having heard she was a 9th grade battle physique, top-tier talent, meaning she wouldn't need much worrying over in terms of future cultivation practices. Little girl, demonstrate your best swordsmanship for me, Jian Wudao said. Bian Rushou looked at the unfamiliar yet imposing elderly man, feeling nervous, and subconsciously glanced at Li Hao for reassurance. Understanding that it was Juer's opportunity, Li Hao immediately smiled and pushed her forward, saying, "Don't be afraid, don't be nervous, I'm right here." Encouraged by Li Hao, Bian Rushou's timidity dissipated quite a bit, and she nodded. The little girl then walked to the side, and without needing He Jianlan to signal, the rest naturally made way for the young girl. Quickly, Bian Rushou's swordsmanship swept out, like snow cascading down. Her posture as graceful as a startled swan, with a mastery and agility in her movements that carried an essence of returning to simplicity and truth. This essence was immediately captured by Jian Wudao, who had been immersed in the sword Dao for nearly 100 years. The old man's sharp, elongated eyes like sword blades suddenly widened, revealing an unmistakable thrill of excitement. This was more than mere talent in the sword Dao. It was the rare genius of the sword Dao that one might see once in a century. At this age, to have cultivated a superior sword technique to perfection was already enough to match his most outstanding disciple, not to mention that there was now a hint of ultimate refinement. What an exceptional sword training prodigy! Jian Wudao couldn't help but burst into laughter, the hearty sound causing the dry leaves on the nearby trees to tremble and fall. Worth it. So worth it. The trip to the mortal world had not been in vain. The people around, hearing the Sword Saint's resonant laughter, immediately knew that the girl's destiny had soared from that moment on. Although already highly esteemed in the Divine General Mansion, praised by the world, it was really meeting a master like the Sword Saint that she truly climbed to the peak, with a future promising to make her a household name celebrated for generations. In an instant, countless complex gazes in the courtyard converged on the young girl holding the sword. Bian Rushou stopped her sword movements, feeling the intense gaze focused on her, and looked nervously towards Li Hao. Li Hao gave her a toothy smile and gave a thumbs up. Bian Rushou understood the gesture was praise for doing a great job. Thus, the young girl also relaxed and smiled broadly. "You've recommended well, very well indeed." The previously serious-faced Jian Wudao, now radiating a commanding aura, laughed heartily, slapping the shoulder of an old military man beside him. If it weren't for his connection with his third disciple, who highly recommended her, he wouldn't have stumbled upon such an exceptional sword talent. The senior flatters us. It's sure's fortune to be apprenticed under the Sword Saint, the old military man said, visibly moved. The two appeared similar in appearance, both looking like men in their 60s, but in reality, the differences in their ages and statuses were extraordinarily vast. Jian Wudao smiled. In excellent spirits, he walked over to the young girl, bent down, and in a pleasant tone said, "Young lady, you like the sword, right? How about I take you on a journey to train?" Bian Rushou was slightly stunned and asked, "Where to?" "Sword Cottage." Jian Wudao, smiling, revealed this holy land coveted by swordsmen all over the world, saying, "I will teach you swordsmanship there, the best there is." Bian Rushou, not understanding, simply asked, "Is it far?" About 9,000 miles to the south, which for you is quite far," Jian Wudao said with a smile. Bian Rushou immediately looked toward Li Hao, not far away, and said, "Brother Hao, are you going too?" Jian Wudao then realized that he had forgotten another child. He, Jianlan, timely approached, quietly smiling. "Sword Saint Senior, you have yet to witness Haoer's talent in the Sword Dao. It's said he also possesses an innate sensibility for it." "Yes, Senior," Li Fu added excitedly, sensing an opportunity. "When Juer practices her swordsmanship, the young master often watches on the side, even giving her some solid advice. Though he hasn't trained formally, he seems to have his own understanding and talent for the Sword Dao." Jian Wudao was somewhat surprised. Glancing at Li Hao, his brow slightly furrowed, but out of respect for He Jianlan nearby, he immediately said, "All right, give him a sword. Let him demonstrate whatever sword move he wants." End quote. "Thank you, Sword Saint Senior." Li Fu was overjoyed, thanking him profusely, then turned to Bian Rushou. "Miss Juer, please lend your sword to the young master for a moment." Bian Rushou obediently nodded, handing the sword over to Li Hao.